Today is March 15th and it is 11:42 a.m. and we're here on Zoom interviewing. My name is Brenann Hamilton with the UNI Museum, and I will be interviewing Karen O'Loughlin Lance. Thank you so much for interviewing with us. So, please state your name, whether or not you're a student or a teacher, and what school you went to and what years you went to that school.
I'm Karen O'Loughlin Lance, and I went all through my high school K through 12 at West Union, and I started in 1956, I believe, and I graduated in 1970, and then I had a year of college at Upper Iowa University.
Can you describe your childhood? Like, when were you born?
I was born in the West Union Hospital,
Mhm.
February of 1952, and my childhood was very simple, very safe. Um, it's a small town, and one set of grandparents lived on one side of town, and the other set of grandparents, and we lived on the other side of town.
What was your family like? How many siblings did you have?
I'm the oldest, and I have two surviving brothers and a sister. And my one baby brother died at birth.
About how far away was your house from the
It
school?
was a little over a mile. Now wait, from my grandma and grandpa's or to school?
From your house, or then also from your grandma and grandpa's if you went to their house often.
Okay. After school, we quite often went to Grandma and Grandpa Miller's to wait for my dad to get off work, and then he would bring us home. Otherwise, my mom took us to school because it was quite a ways, and then we would walk home from school. So it was almost a mile from our house to the school when I first started, and then when we went to elementary school, it was just up the block from my Grandma and Grandpa Miller's house. So it was a little over a mile, but it was still good.
Okay, and your grandma and grandpa Miller, they were your mom's parents or your dad's
My dad's parents.
parents? Okay.
So we lived next door to my mom's parents, and then we lived across town from my dad's parents. But they lived right next door. Literally, they sold some of their land to the school for the new school, elementary school, to be built.
What were some of your interests as a child?
I was the only girl in my group because mostly we played with my brothers and my cousins. My brother and my cousins were boys, and my uncle, who's 13 months older than I am. So I did a lot of what the boys did. We did a lot of running and biking and climbing trees, warp, just that type of thing. I was always made the nurse because I was the only girl. Let's see what else. I loved horses. Loved horses. Loved animals. Had lots of pets.
So when you were a kid, did you like going to school?
I did. I loved going to school. I loved learning. I loved the social aspect of it. Again, that's where I got to spend time with girls. My cousin Shirley, who my third daughter is named after her, in a way, she was 4 years older than me, and she was like my everything. She was my mentor, my protector, my teacher. She was just everything.
What did you want to be when you grew up?
I wanted to either be a nurse or a teacher because I loved little kids and I love learning and I love teaching, but I also love taking care of people.
So what role did school play in your upbringing? Like, was it seen as more of an option or definitely more of a requirement for you?
It was an option. I mean, I loved school. I loved going. I loved being there. I loved learning.
What was your favorite school subject?
History, English. History and English were my majors in college, and I really liked that. Library science because I love library.
You attended West Union School K-12, correct?
Right.
Okay, and so that was just one school building, or were there different schools? How did that work?
It was several buildings. We had different classes in different buildings, but at first they were side by side. And the kindergarten kids were in the basement when I first started. And then first graders were on the first floor, and then the second graders were on the second floor. It just worked out that way. It wasn't because of what the numbers were. It's just that's the way it was. And then when we consolidated between my second grade and third grade, they built the new school on the north end of town, again above my grandma and grandpa's house, which is north of my grandma and grandpa. Um, and then the kids from El Dorado came to West Union, and there weren't a lot of them, so it didn't make a huge difference. But then the elementary in Hawkeye and Alpha went together in Hawkeye, and they stayed. They stayed there until eighth grade, and then in ninth grade they came over and joined the big school, and so that was where we had different things. And then I was the last year to graduate from our old school building, and um, that was in 1970. In 1971 is a new high school, and that was huge, huge, all one floor building, and it was so different.
Okay. And when the consolidation happened, you said you were in second to third grade. Which years were those?
Mm-hmm. Those between that 2 years.
So, what is one of your earliest memories of going to school?
I remember being told we had to take a nap, and I never took naps, so that was hard.
Yeah.
And I know I was fidgety, and
For nap time, did you have to have any specific?
we had a rug, and it
Oh,
was a little braided rug, and that I had to bring from home, but it stayed in my little cubby at school. So every day when we had to take a nap, we laid down on that little rug, and we had to be quiet. I think maybe one kid ever fell asleep. I mean, the rest of us were just, we were 4 and 5, and we were antsy as all get out. It's hard to lay down. And it was a cement floor because, again, we were on the basement. So that was hard too. We didn't have blankets, but
okay.
just a rug.
How long did you have nap time for? Was it all the way kindergarten, first grade? When did it?
Well, I'm just kindergarten. And we only went to half day kindergarten. I went in the mornings. And our nap time was maybe 20, 30 minutes. I can't remember for sure. It seemed like forever, but it really was maybe 20 or 30 minutes.
So, what did a typical morning before school look like?
Rushing. And so, anyway, it was pretty much, just get up in the morning and go to the bathroom and have breakfast and get you dressed and wash your face and whatever and get your coat on and head for the car. So,
Did your school have uniforms?
no.
So, what were some chores that you had to do when you were at home? At home
Well, like I said, I was the oldest of 4 kids, so watching my younger siblings so that my mom could do stuff was a big part of my chores. Also, the feeding and watering the pets, and clearing the table, putting the dishes in the not the dishwasher. We did not have a dishwasher. We had my mom. She washed the dishes. Put those in the sink, and mostly it's taking at first, especially because I'm 12 years older than my baby brother, but I'm 6 years older than my sister, and then 2 years older than my other brother. So I spent a lot of time taking care of my sister, and then later my little brother.
What are your siblings' names?
Randy is 2 years younger than I am, and Linda is 6 years younger than I am, and Marty is 12 years younger than I am.
What was your attire for school? Did you have a uniform, or was there expectations of what you wore?
There was. I mean, we didn't have a lot of money, so every school year, I got to get 2 new dresses and a new pair of shoes and a set of new socks and new underwear, and that was a big deal. And we had a dress code until I was graduated. As soon as we graduated, they did away with the dress code, which I thought was extremely unfair. But girls had to wear dresses always. They could wear jeans or pants under their dress so that when we went out for recess, our legs weren't cold. But we had to have dresses. That was just absolute. Girls had to do that. And boys were not supposed to wear boots. They were only supposed to have, they could wear tennis shoes, but usually they were more of a dressier type shoe, not usually tennis shoes for school. We had to have tennis shoes for gym. The requirement was that the skirt had to be long enough that when we put our hands down by our sides, the hem was supposed to be to our fingertips. that got relaxed a little bit later on, but not much. And the boys could not have hair long enough to touch their collars. Very difficult in 1968, 970, because that was when the Beatles were coming and their long, long hair. And
So you mentioned earlier that when you got to school, you typically got there by your mom driving you. Was that always the case, or were there any different ways that you got to school?
nope, that was pretty much always it. Once in a while, if it was really bad weather, my grandpa, who lived next door, my grandpa Jacobson, would take us kids because he was worried about us being out and about when it was, really lots of snow if they didn't call school. Um, so once in a great while he would take us, but usually it was my mom. Unless it was really nasty, we walked home. I mean, mom would come and get us if it was nasty weather.
Did you ever have snow days at all, or?
Yes, but they were few and far between, not like now where, nope, it's too cold, we can't have school. No, we had school.
Oh,
Unless it was really deep snow or really freezing rain, we had school.
did your school have heating or air conditioning?
No air conditioning. Um, our principal, when I was in high school, decided he was entitled to air conditioning in his office, but the rest of us suffered through with the teachers would bring fans sometimes, and we had windows that would open and close. And so they would bring fans
Mm-hmm.
or in the windows to help cool us off a little bit. And it was an old brick building, so
Oh, yeah.
it got really, really hot in the summer.
So, was there any unique or interesting ways that you got to school?
Nope, that was pretty much it. As I got older, when I got my driver's license, then sometimes I would get to drive to school, and then I would take Uncle Randy and Linda and Uncle Marty to school sometimes. And I had a job too, so it's nice to have a car.
Okay. Where did you work?
I worked at the Barrel. I started babysitting when I was 11, so I started working doing that stuff.
Can you describe the way that your school looked and the layout of the classroom and like what the interior and exterior were? Maybe start with each school, so like the elementary school first and then.
Well, when I first started school, there were two brick buildings that had a passageway connecting them at the top and a passageway in the basement that connected them. You had to go through the lunchroom in the basement. They were old brick. I don't know when they were built, 18 something. And my grandma Jacobson went to school in those buildings. They were the same then. Let's see. So they were brick, old brick buildings. They are both gone now. They tore them down. And then when I got to the elementary school, it was a two-story building, but from the outside it looks like it's one story. But inside there's a basement that we had classrooms in also. And then I went back up to the high school then when I finished elementary in the new building. And then I was in the other building. So I was not in the first building anymore.
And did you have a middle school building, or was middle school
a junior high?
A separate building from those two?
Well, they were connected. And a lot of our classes we would do back and forth quite a bit. Some of our junior high classes were in the high school building because we had the same teacher. We passed around, different. They had a bell that would ring, and then you had 3 minutes to get from one class to the next class. And it didn't matter if you were in the basement of the junior high and you had to go to the third story in the high school, you still only had 3 minutes and you better get there. And the hallways were really crowded. It was hard sometimes to make that connection.
Okay, so the junior high and high school had 3 stories, including a basement, and the elementary school that you went to, you said that it was 2 stories with a basement in the first floor?
Right.
Okay.
But the basement was kind of like a split level house in that you couldn't see that it was like that from the outside unless you were in the back of the building. And then we had doors that went out to the playground that were on the ground level or below ground level.
Were there any other defining features of your schools, like any playgrounds or equipment, stuff like that?
Before we consolidated, the playground equipment was pretty minimal. We had a merry-go-round and a jungle gym and a big old set of swings. And then we had baseball diamonds and stuff, and played a lot of stuff where you could either play on the baseball diamond, or there's another big field next to that where the boys would play catch or football or whatever. And there was a wonderful hill outside that building so that we could get the boxes out of the dumpster where the cooks had thrown the boxes from the lunch, and we could slide down that hill, and that was a lot of fun. But only cardboard boxes could be used for fear of somebody getting hurt.
Was the school nearby any busy streets or anything? Like, was it in pretty much in the middle of town? Where would you?
It was the high school and junior high were on the right on the edge of Main Street type thing. You know, we were right on the edge of the business district, and it was right across the street from the courthouse and the jail. It was very consolidated there. And then over on the other side was a Catholic church, and then on the north side of the school ground was Highway 18, which is a very busy highway. So they put up a fence to keep the kids more safe. The new school was more like on the edge of town. And then they built a swimming pool up there. So we had that.
So the new school, that wasn't in place until after you had left, correct?
The new high school was in place after we left, yes.
When you arrived at school, how did the school day begin?
We were supposed to go sit down. I mean, we could play for a little bit, talking and whatever, but we were supposed to be ready to go by 8:30. And then at 8:40, the principal would get on the PA system and he would give the first we did the Pledge of Allegiance, and then we would have the day's announcements for whatever, if there was something special going to be happening. And it could be current events like the space shuttle, because when John Glenn went up, they took us all into the lunchroom and we sat on the floor. Again, girls wore dresses. It was very, very cold, and watched on the one big TV. And when I say big, it was big by our standards, but really tiny by today's. And we watched as he made his trips around the earth, and it was very cool.
So when you arrived at school, you mentioned that a lot of times you would be inside talking kind of in the classroom. Did you do any other activities before school? Like,
some of the kids would go out and play on the playground, but I just was more interested in visiting with my friends.
So how many students were in your grade?
Before we consolidated, we had 2 classrooms for each grade. Mm-hmm. And then after we consolidated, we had 3 for most, between 20, 25 kids.
How big was your school typically? How many kids were in the overall school?
I don't really know, but now when we graduated, my class graduated in 1970, we were the largest class to ever graduate from North Fayette, because it wasn't North Fayette then, it was North High. When Grandpa and Uncle Jake went to West Union School, it was called West Union High School, and the sports teams were called the Bombers. Then when we changed it to North, it was just North High. Then it became the Hawks, and that was, I think, when we consolidated.
So how do you remember your classmates?
We had, different levels. There were some kids that were richer, and then we had the big, huge middle class, and then we had really poor kids. Middle class was huge. I mean, the middle class people were huge. We'd have 5 or 6 that were really rich, and we'd have 5 or 6 that were really, really poor, and then the rest of us kind of fit into different levels of middle income.
How do you think your classmates would remember you?
Probably most of them would remember that I was really skinny and I had really long hair, that I had a nice smile, and that I was smart. I was fairly smart.
So when you're at school, what lessons did you study?
We had music, which in the elementary was really cool because we had a music teacher who would go around with her piano to each classroom. And we didn't go to her room, she came to our room. And that was pretty cool. And we had math, and we had English, and we had history, and we had PE. That was pretty much. And then, of course, we had lunchroom, we had recess, morning and afternoon recess, and recess after lunch.
What was a typical music lesson like?
Well, Mrs. Holmstrom would pass out the music books, and she would tell us which songs we were going to sing. And sometimes we learned a new song, and sometimes we just sang the songs we already knew. And then when we got to be in, I think, 5th grade, we had what we called our little flutes, which now you kids call the recorder. And we got to take them home at the end of the school year, but we were supposed to remember to bring them back the next year. Otherwise, we had to buy new ones. And that was interesting because we were supposed to practice over the summer, and I don't think very many people did.
Did you have music all the way through from K-12, or how did that change as you were?
Yeah, in some respect or another, we did, except in high school. It was not mandatory to have music. I love music, and so I went out for mixed chorus and girls' glee and that kind of thing.
Okay. You mentioned that your teacher used a piano. Did the teacher at all ever use like a radio or any other form of technology?
No, no. Back then there wasn't that much different technology. It was just she played the piano.
Do you remember, did you ever use the Fullerton music education books? Or
I don't remember that, no.
when you were in lessons for the rest of the school day, what was that like? How did the teacher teach you?
And when we got in fifth grade, we had more specialty teachers, where we went to this teacher for English and whatever, and then this teacher for math and science. Yeah, we did have science. We did move around in our classrooms. I mean, from class to class.
Okay.
But we had a homeroom, and that was our homeroom teacher. But then, and she would teach us whichever class she taught, and then we would go to one of the other two classrooms.
What did the classrooms typically look like when you were inside of them?
Um, they were painted brick walls, and we had lots of windows, and the windows opened, and we had a little the heater was over under the windows. Our desks were the one piece desk, where the table at the desk was here, and then the seat was there, and then our desk would open up, top, and then there'd be a thing at the top for us to keep our pencils and stuff and our rulers.
Anything else? Like, how was the classroom itself decorated? Did teachers have posters?
Whatever the teacher wanted to put up, she did.
Okay.
Usually there were, like up at the top, the very top, there would be a line of penmanship. And when we were learning our cursive, what the letters are supposed to look like. So they'd be the alphabet, but it'd be in cursive so that we would know that was how we're supposed to make our letters. We did a lot of practicing with that. We started learning cursive in second grade.
Yeah.
By third grade, we were really advanced and thought we really knew everything, but yeah.
Did you ever have to take any typing classes?
Yes, we started typing in junior high.
How was the school day typically structured? Like, was there any specific classes that you always usually had in the morning or typically always had at the afternoon?
It depended on which class it was, because in seventh and eighth grade, and ninth grade, we were in the junior high building, and we had homerooms. And then our teacher, my first year there, was a science teacher. And so he taught us science and biology. And then when we got older, we had to go over, I think it was eighth grade. We went to Mr. Sampson, without the P, and had chemistry and physics later, just a taste of it. We didn't do that. So some of the high school classes we would have just for a semester to see if we liked it, so that when we would know when we got into high school if that would be something that we'd really want to take. So we were very fortunate with that. And we had industrial arts, which was shop, and we learned how to handle tools and make things and saws and power tools and stuff.
Did your school offer foreign languages?
Yes, I took German. In junior high, it was German. That's what you had. You didn't have a choice. But then in high school, my best friend Karen she took Latin.
Okay.
So basically, we both learned a lot about two languages because we would help each other study. But I had 6 years of German.
Okay. So it was either German or Latin or any other?
Nope, that was what we had. We just had those two.
I know you mentioned that you did have PE or physical education. Did you have any set uniforms for PE, or were you just expected to work out in your dresses?
No. We had white shirts and navy blue shorts, white socks, and tennis shoes.
Did you have PE with both genders together, or were they separate?
Usually separate. Once in a while, we would have something together, like when we would have the dance segment, and then with the boys and girls would be together. And for volleyball, sometimes we would have that unit together, so it would be boys and girls. But for the most part, it was girls, and we had Miss Mum, and boys who had Mr. Simpson.
Okay. Did you have a gymnasium, or was the gymnasium also part of the cafeteria?
Our cafeteria was in the basement for our junior high and high school, but the gym was for basketball and PE classes. But then later, they did have some classes there where the gym was used for a cafeteria.
Okay.
They had little away tables that they would bring in, before they tore down that building. They used it for the junior high and stuff there.
In your elementary school, was it very similar to that, or?
In the elementary, we had a multi-purpose room clear at the end of the building, and that was for small things like, like when we were doing dance stuff, they would take us down there because we were loud, and they didn't want the classes disrupted. But otherwise, it was mostly the lunchroom was everything. It was where they had the stage there, so that's where we had our programs, and it had lunch tables that were up in the wall that would be folded down. So that was used a lot.
In your junior high and high school, what were some of the activities that were offered? Were there sports or band, choir? Obviously, you mentioned.
We have a lot of sports available to girls. Mm-hmm. Every year, starting when I was in junior high, mm-hmm. I would get a petition started to allow us to have girls basketball, at least. We did have girls softball, but we didn't have some of the other stuff. And I love basketball, and I wanted to be able to have basketball. And every year I got shot down because they always said, well, there's not room, but when we get to the new building, then we'll be able to. Well, I was going to graduate in 70. That didn't do me any good. I was not happy with that. But they did have girls softball and pep club and things like that.
What was pep club?
Pep club was when a bunch of girls got together and we would go ride the bus to wherever the boys were playing, and we would cheer them on. We knew all the cheers and stuff, and we would really support them.
Is this separate from cheerleading, or?
Yes, it was. There was cheerleaders, and then there was the pep club, and we were kind of an extension of the cheerleaders, because not everybody can be a cheerleader, but everybody can be in pep club, although it's mostly girls. I don't think there's boys in pep club, but.
So going back to the school day, did you have any exams or writing assignments, or how did the teacher grade you? Or were you graded? How did that work?
Oh, yeah, we were graded. And back then it was, A, B, C, D, F. There was no all this other stuff. Well, there was that over on the right-hand side of the report card. There was S for satisfactory and U for unsatisfactory. There was no in between for that either. We had like the end of the chapter tests in history and things like that. There would be multiple. We had a lot of tests for every subject had lots of tests. So it was very achievement oriented.
Okay. Did you have any standardized tests at all, or were they just?
Yeah, we had ITED tests, basic skills, things like that. And those were a big deal. That was just a big deal. Okay. Everybody wanted me, not everybody. Some people just went through and marked the circles, making designs and stuff. They thought that was funny. But I took it very seriously. Okay. And most of my friends did too.
Were those yearly exams, or was that sort of like did you have 8th grade exams at all? Like, were they just set for certain grades? How did that work?
Well, every class had to take this once a year to see how they were doing, and how the school was doing in teaching us. We didn't have that special big 8th grade exam like the earlier people did, like Aunt Janice, and we had final exam for every class, but at the end of the year for all of us, but we didn't have the other stuff.
Mm-hmm. And just for clarification, Aunt Janice is Janice Bracken, who I interviewed last week. Yes, and she is related to your husband, David, and is his sister.
Yes.
Alrighty. So going back to the questions, what were your teachers like?
They were very professional. They wanted to be there. They wanted to teach kids. It was not just a job to the teachers that I had. They really were interested in the kids and their well-being and figuring out what to do to teach them, because not everybody learns the same. And mm-hmm. So they were trying to make sure that they reached each and every kid. And I'm so grateful to grow up when I did, because the teachers and the parents worked together for the benefit of the student. And they were a team. If you got in trouble at school, you were in more trouble when you got home. your parents did not want you to be disrespectful to the teacher or any of that stuff. And what did you do to cause this situation? But also, there was corporal punishment
Oh,
when I was in school, and going to the principal, especially the girl. I don't remember the girls getting spanked, but boys sometimes got spanked with a paddle. I never witnessed it, but I heard about it, and it was scary. So,
were there any other punishments that your teachers would give out if you were?
detention. Well, I didn't, but there was detention.
Mhm.
Um, and so you had to stay after school for half an hour, or whatever, every week, or I mean, every day for a week, or 3 days, or whatever. In high school, you could get a 3 day suspension if you did something really horrendous. Um, you could get a 3 day suspension.
Did they have corporal punishment throughout your entire time in school, or was there a point where they stopped doing that?
No, it could be the entire time. By high school, the boys were not as willing to be punished. And so some of them fought back, and then they would get a 3 day suspension, and that would go on their record.
Were there specific teaching positions that seemed to only be filled by women or by men or anything like that?
Um, we had several men teachers. I don't think that, well, except for shop and voc ag, those were male teachers. But other than that, I think that it was kind of across the board. It could be whatever. It seemed like most of my math teachers were men, and most of my English teachers were women. One of my favorite teachers was Mr. Miller, who is no relation, but he was a history teacher, and I I just loved being in his classroom. He just made that. But I'm not saying that it had to be either or, because except for voc ag and shop, those were men. But some of our English teachers, one of them that I had was a man. Science teachers, it just seemed to be like math and science were almost always men,
No.
but the others, that could be man or woman.
What did teachers typically wear to school? Were they dressed very professionally or similar to the students? How did that?
We were always very professionally dressed. Women had dresses and nylon pantyhose and dress shoes, and the men had their shoes were polished and they wore slacks and usually a jacket. It could be a sports jacket, but or a suit jacket, um, and they usually had ties on. They were very professional.
What else was expected for you? Did you have any homework or?
Yes, we had homework, and it was all involved with here's your textbook and you had a 3 ring binder, you had filler paper, you had crayons and a ruler and pens and pencils that you kept in a bag that went in your 3 ring binder. And then that's how you did your homework. They would hand out worksheets, and you had to fill those in, and you were expected to have your homework done when it was due. There
Okay.
was no discussion about that, unless, I mean, but they were, like I said, they were very interested in the student. And if there was a really serious issue, like when my grandma got really, really sick, I did not have my homework done for the next day because we went to Iowa City. And I told my teachers that, and they made allowances for Randy and I for that. So otherwise, yeah, you're supposed to have your homework done. But
Makes
we didn't get inundated with homework. It was not like they thought, well, my class is the only class this kid's going to have, so I can give them 20 pages of homework. They didn't do that.
When did you start to receive homework? Was it right away in like high school or did it
Third
start?
grade. Third grade.
Well, you mentioned for recess and lunches. How long did you have recesses for?
I think they were maybe 20 minutes long. I'm
Okay.
not sure on that. And then lunch was only like a half an hour, and then maybe even 20 minutes. And then we played outside for 20 minutes, and then we were back in the classroom and
Okay.
expected to be ready to get back to work.
hmm So, did you have recess all the way through, like through junior high at all, or any scheduled breaks, or when did recess stop?
No, recess stopped when we graduated 6th grade. When we
Okay.
went into junior high, we had lunch, and then we had a little bit of time after lunch, but it was not recess time. It was just, a break. But
Oh,
other than that, they figured you're old enough to be sitting quietly in your seat and do it.
and when you were older in high school, were all of the lunches expected to be taken at the school, or were you allowed to have like an open campus lunch?
We did have open campus then, but then when they went to the new school building, because it was way out in the country kind of thing, they had a closed campus pretty much for that. I guess there were some kids who did get in their cars and go downtown, but we could either eat at the lunchroom, or we could bring our lunch, or we could go downtown.
Okay, yeah. What did you typically eat for lunch? Did your school provide like a hot lunch option, or how did that work? Or was everyone supposed to bring their old like cold lunch?
No, we could bring our lunch in a little lunch box or a brown paper bag or whatever. They actually had a provision so that we could get milk. And that way you didn't have to worry about carrying milk and keeping it cold, because we didn't have a lot of options for keeping things cold. Um, but when you went through the lunchroom, you took your little tray, and then they would dish up your plate and put it on the tray, and then you'd go down, and then you would get your dessert, and then you'd go pick up your milk, and then you'd go sit down at a table.
Okay.
So there's no, you couldn't say, no, I don't want those peas, because you were going to get peas whether you wanted them or not. And the teachers once in a while would go by the tables and they'd say, you're not eating your peas and you need to eat your peas. In high school, but in junior high, they still did.
Were you allowed to throw things away?
We threw some things away, but we still had to eat, make an effort to eat most of it.
Yeah. So when you went to the lunchroom, did you sit with your class, or were you able to just sit wherever you liked to be with your friends?
Well, we all had lunch pretty much together, but it was usually within our class. So we could sit with our friends, but it was within our class. Adjusted so that each class was here at this time, and then 10 minutes later, the next class would come down, and then 10 minutes later. So they were kind of staggering it so that we didn't all eat at the same time. It was a big lunchroom in the basement, but not big enough for the whole school, because we're talking
Oh, yes.
several hundreds kids, and so wouldn't work.
Hmm. So did you typically always eat the hot lunch or the school provided option, or did you ever pack your own lunch?
We pretty much, because Grandma wanted us to have a good nutritious meal. So until I got into high school, I pretty much ate the school lunch,
Oh.
and then the last couple of years I would go downtown more. But junior high, I always ate.
Was there a specific popular lunch or popular food when you were a kid?
Not really. I mean, it was just standard. This was the school lunch. We
Oh.
were pretty much used to it.
What was recess like when you were a kid? Was it always outside? Did you have indoor recess at all?
Depended on the weather, but if at all possible, they put us outside. They wanted you to be outside because it's important for young kids to be out doing physical exercise, getting fresh air. They do a lot better in school when they do. So it's important to go outside. And they tried to do that. And it was hard on the teachers because, they just have to stand around watching the kids play. And they, especially when I was a kid, they had to wear dresses too. And so they had no protection on their legs, and they might put boots on, but their legs would be just pantyhose. And that's cold. That's just really, really cold. But they went out and they stood there and they did it so that we would have the fresh air and the exercise.
You mentioned about your elementary school playground that you had a baseball field. Did your school provide set toys for you to play with, like basketballs, footballs, or baseballs, bats, any equipment?
Yeah, they were there and available for the boys to grab and go play with. The girls did more, not so much sports stuff. We played on the playground equipment more, but the boys did more of the football and baseball and that type of thing.
Were there any forbidden games or activities that just weren't allowed at the playground?
No, and it makes Grandpa and I so sad when we hear that you can't play dodgeball anymore, you can't play kickball anymore, because we did that a lot. I mean, we loved playing that kind of things.
How did your school day end?
The kids would watch the clock, and then the buzzer would ring, and then we'd get to go.
Did you have lockers as a kid? Or
In elementary school, we did not. We had hooks and a shelf,
okay.
and the hooks and the shelf lined the hallway. So all of our stuff was out in the hallway. And then underneath there in the wintertime, our boots were on the floor. Then when we got into junior high, we had tiniest little lockers, but then we still had the coat hooks and shelf and boots there. But the little lockers were for our books.
Oh.
And in high school, we had the bigger lockers that were half and half, so that was freshman. And then in regular high school, when you're a big kid, then you had a full locker, but you shared it with somebody.
For school with your supplies, were you expected to buy them all yourself, or were some things provided? Did you rent books at all?
Pretty much everything was provided except for the books, and the books were provided by the school.
Mm-hmm.
As that's part of the fee. You were expected to keep your book nice. You were not allowed to write in your book because those had to be handed down for however many years.
Did you have to make book covers at all?
I liked to do that, and I did do that quite often with my books because I like them to look nice. And some of them, especially when they were on their last year or two of using that book, they looked really ratty.
You've talked about the consolidation that happened when you were a second and third grader. So what was that experience like?
Well, in my class, we only got, I think, 3 or 4 kids in that year. And that was really cool because I kind of knew those kids already. And then when we were in junior high and all of us came together to be in junior high and high school, that was really fun because we got an influx of like 12 kids in each of our sections, and that really opened up a lot of possibilities for us. And I made the best lifetime friend of mine there that first day, and that was really cool.
What was that friend's name?
Karen.
Karen.
And she sat right beside me in Mr. Heyer's class, who was a good friend of Uncle Jake. And so we were talking when school was getting ready to start, and we were both named Karen, and we thought that was so fun. And we just hit it off so good. And I went home and I told my mom, I've made this new friend. And she said, what's her name? And I told her, and my mom started laughing and she said, you need to go tell your grandpa. And I'm like, why? He wouldn't care. And I said, you go tell your grandpa. And I went up and told my grandpa Jacobson. And she was the granddaughter of his first cousin. And all my life, I sat and listened to him talk Norwegian to his cousin on the phone. Mm-hmm. And that was her grandpa that he was talking to. And Karen would sit and listen to her grandpa talk to Herman, and I would listen to my grandpa talking to Teddy. And so that was really so much fun. And we went back to school the next day and we're related. And so we always called each other cousin. Even though we were like fifth cousins, it was really fun. If it was Friday night, either I was at her house or she was at my house. We're always together.
You mentioned a teacher's name, Mr. Hiram, I believe?
Higher.
Higher? Okay. What class?
His first name was Tex.
What class did he teach?
He taught science and biology in junior high. It was really fun because he was good friends with my parents and with my Uncle Jake. And so there was a big connection there. I
know that you mentioned that the Jacobsons gave some land to the school so that they could...
The Millers did.
The Millers gave some land to the school. Were any of your family members on the school board, or when they were giving the land to the school, how did that process?
And they didn't give it, they sold it, but they sold it at a reasonable, less than probably what they could have gotten if they would have sold it to somebody else.
Yeah. What was that experience like?
Oh, it didn't. What was the big experience there is that where the school sat was where, when I would go down to visit my grandma and grandpa, my grandma's sister and her family lived next door to each other. Mm-hmm. And then their mom lived in a little trailer between the two houses. So when I would go down there, we would just this huge family thing. And we would go where the school parking lot is now. That was just an open area. And we would go there to play. And then between second and third grade, we weren't allowed up there because that's the school. And so it took away our family play area.
So going back to the consolidation, How did student life change during and after consolidation? Did you notice any changes when these new students came to your classrooms, or?
Not so much. I mean, it gave us an opportunity to have more new friends.
Okay.
For me, it was not that different. For Karen, it was fantastic because where she lived, she could not call her friends after school to talk because she had a West Union phone number and all of her friends had a Hawkeye phone number, and you couldn't call long distance because it cost too much money. Well, then when we became friends, we talked all the time on the phone, which got very irritating to our family. But it was so much fun for us because then we could talk to each other. And she never had that experience before. She never had a friend that she could call on the phone. And so then we could really talk, and that was really good. So it was different for her. She rode the bus her whole life, but then instead of just riding from her house to Hawkeye, she rode from her house to Hawkeye to West Union, because then they would drive them to Hawkeye, and then the big kids would stay on the bus and the little kids got off, and then they would have to drive them to West Union. So she had to get on the bus a lot earlier than she had to before. And the Hawkeye Town kids, instead of just walking to school, they walked to school, but then they had to get on a bus and be driven to West Union. So it was a big change for them. For the West Union kids, it really wasn't hard of a change, except we had new friends that we hadn't had before.
Mm-hmm. Did your class structure or size change? I know you mentioned in the first consolidation that you went from having 2 classrooms to 3 classrooms of students.
Right.
How did that change lessons or anything?
I don't think so much. Teachers were respected, and they could handle more. But when in junior high, because then we had a really huge amount. Like I said, we were the biggest class to graduate from North, and we had 4 sections. So we had 7-1, 7-2, 7-3, 7-4, and they would be mixed up so that they scrambled them in that. So each section would have a couple of really smart kids, and then a big section of medium kids, and then a couple of slower kids, so that it wasn't like, well, 7-4's the dumb class or anything like that. You know, it was just everybody was dealt with different. I mean, they scrambled our names and stuff so that we had a really good balance in the classroom. Okay. And that was good. That was really good.
Did lessons change at all, or were you required when there was new students to get any new materials? Did you have to switch teachers at all to make room for these new students? Or
no, I think the only thing that they did to accommodate was I had a teacher whose daughter was in my class.
Oh, okay.
So when she would have normally taught our class, they switched her, so she never had her daughter in class because they just did not feel that would be the correct thing to do. Mm-hmm. And then as soon as Shelley graduated from that area, then Mrs. Cyril switched back so that she taught 7th grade again instead of just 8th grade. And that's the only thing I remember that we really got. And that wasn't because of consolidation. That was just they felt that it was not good for a parent to teach their kid.
You mentioned that you just saw the new rural kids coming into your school as just new opportunities for friendships. Right. Would you say that everyone viewed it that way? How is the typical interaction?
I don't think that anybody, because that's just the way it was. I mean, back then we accepted things. They told us this was going to be what it was, and this is what it was, and so we just accepted it. Mm-hmm. There wasn't any big concern about it. Yes, it was a bigger school, but like I said, it was harder for the kids who were coming from the tiny schools to our big consolidated school.
When you were in school, did your teachers offer any field trips or special class parties, anything like that?
Not special class parties, but we did go on field trips. And we went to several different places that a lot of the kids would never have gotten to go to if it hadn't been for field trips in school. And I suppose we took maybe 2 or 3 field trips a year. And then I was in like FHA, which is Future Homemakers of America. Mrs. Dessel arranged for us to go to the state capitol in Des Moines for a special day. And when we went down for this big FHA convention, she also made sure that we didn't just go to that big class school function thing. We also got to go see the Capitol. And
Oh,
then we got to go see the Natural History Museum, which, oh my gosh, has changed so much from then. But she was very adamant to try to expand our horizons and stuff. And Des
so
Moines is a huge deal from Fayette. They're from West Union, I mean.
so you were in FHA and Pep Club and also Glee and Women's Choir. Were there any other organizations you were a part of when you were in school?
Um, yes, I was in office education. It was called OE, and that was because I was going to be a secretary, working my way through college. I thought I was in mixed chorus and girls' glee. I did not get to go to band because we couldn't afford the instrument. I really, really wanted to do that, but we couldn't afford that. I was in Pep Club and FHA. I guess I said that, and then OE. So those organizations.
What did you typically do in FHA?
Well, FHA was really cool. We met once a month. It was discussing about how things were changing
Mhm.
in our society and things, how homemaking was going to be different, how family life was going to be different.
What was the typical school schedule like for the year? Did you have like Thanksgiving break, Christmas break, any set holidays? When did the school year start? When did it end?
It was typically the second to the last Thursday in August, I think it was, that we started school. We got off for Labor Day weekend. We got off for Thanksgiving weekend. For Thanksgiving, um, Thanksgiving's on Thursday. We got out early on Wednesday usually, and then it would go for the whole weekend. We'd go back to school on Monday. Christmas was a few days before Christmas until January 3rd, usually. Almost always started on my mom's birthday, and then we would have Easter break where we got off on early Thursday. So we were off for Good Friday and then Easter weekend and usually Monday, Easter Monday. But if we had a lot of snow days, then we lost our days there. We still had Good Friday off, but we might not get out early Thursday, and we did not have Monday off.
Oh,
So make up for it, so we didn't have to go for an extended time during the year. And then we usually got off just before Memorial Day weekend. Was our last day of school. But then snow days and stuff, a lot of times that got moved back.
so what did you typically do over breaks?
I just played with my siblings and my cousins, and we just had this it was just fun.
Did you ever have any school classes that took place during breaks, specifically like a summer school program?
Well, not for me. I would love to have done that, but no. I did take, I was offered to take some college classes when I was in high school because I was in the top five. And so I got special offers from Upper Iowa to come down and take some summer college courses.
Mhm.
And Grandma wouldn't let me because she said she did not think it was safe for a young teenage girl to be down there with all those college boys. So she wouldn't let me do that. But I really wanted to. I thought that would be so cool to be able to go to college.
Was your school used for any community events at all?
Yes, would get it on the schedule, and they would have different things at our school. We would have like different sports banquets and things. When I was a junior and senior, and we were in FHA,
Mhm.
they had like football banquets and stuff in the gymnasium,
Mhm.
not in the lunchroom, but in the gymnasium. And then the FHA girls would serve the food, and then the football team would give us money for doing that so that we could build up our coffers.
Were there any other ways that the school building or yard were used? Like, did you have any voting ever take place at your school or meetings?
Um, I'm sure there were. I don't remember
Okay.
so much that they were, but I'm sure that there was.
So, what did students around your community typically do during the summer months? Like, did they also just mostly spend time at home with their families? What was the
Um, well, now like my friend Linda Oakland, she went to Wisconsin Dells every summer to work up there so that she could get enough money to become a nurse,
oh,
and she was gone for the whole summer. Um, and different other kids would go. I did a lot of babysitting during the summer so that I could earn extra money. Your grandpa and I are planning on getting married, and I wanted to get some money saved up for that. People did a lot of lawn mowing to earn money. We worked hard during the summer because during the school year it was hard to work because our school hours were, and you wanted to keep your grades up, so you didn't have a lot of jobs during the school year.
Okay.
That were a long time thing. I worked as a secretary my senior year for the school, so that was good. I got a lot of experience there, and I loved each day I worked at a different place, so I bounced around. And 2 days I worked at the library, which was wonderful because I loved the librarians.
And earlier when you mentioned my grandpa, I just want to clarify because I'm also going to be interviewing Grandpa Davy here. That was my late grandfather, William Francis O'Loughlin III.
Yes, that was my first husband, my high school sweetheart.
Yes. When did you meet?
We were at this football game, and he was standing behind me, and he was talking to a friend of mine about me, and I was so embarrassed. And finally I turned around and I said, will you just stop? If you want to talk to me, but don't talk about me like that. And so then he laughed, and then Kirk introduced us, and so then Grandpa came and stood beside me through the rest of the game, and then he walked me down to my grandma and grandpa's, and then he saw me in school a couple of times, and he would wait then for me and walk me to my class, and then race to whatever class he was supposed to be at, so that he would not be late. And so we dated all through his senior year and my freshman year, and then he went for a year of school at Calmer when they were first starting Area 1, and then he went to the Navy. And then when I graduated, the month after we graduated, we got married.
When you were in school, do you remember any major local, national, or world events that occurred during the years? I know you mentioned watching the
Space shuttle.
The space shuttle.
Yes, when President Kennedy was assassinated, and it was just horrific. I was in 6th grade. We were getting ready for Thanksgiving break. We were going to be leaving school, and our teacher came in and said, "Did you hear the president got shot?" And we thought, because she was always joking around with us, we thought that was some sort of sick joke. And she said, "I'm serious. President Kennedy has been shot, and they don't know if he's dead or alive." And we were just stunned. There were just no words about, because we all loved him. He was just so cool and so handsome and so vibrant and a war hero and all this stuff. And then he was just dead. And we were all just glued to the TV watching all the things unfold. And we were literally watching TV when Lee Harvey Oswald got shot.
Wow.
And when Jack Ruby came in and shot him, and we saw him get shot. Thank God it was black and white TV, but we saw him get shot. We saw him start to fall. We saw all the chaos there. And I can remember my mom just so devastated and crying so hard. And my dad putting his arms around her and saying, "Donna, you got to stop this. You got to think of the baby. You can't get this upset." And she just kept, I know, but she just kept crying. And we were just horrified.
When you were in school, that was also during the Cold War. Did that impact your...
Right. We talked about that a lot in school. We had fire drills, and they talk about, I know different schools were taught to duck under their desks. We did not do that. We went out into the hallway, and we had to tuck, into a fetal position kind of thing and sit in the hallway for a tornado drill, for whatever. That's what we were supposed to do. And there are a lot of people who were making bomb shelters.
Okay.
And we, as a family, we discussed that. And my mom always said, if we weren't all together when that happened, then she wouldn't want to be left alive anyway. So she didn't think that was a really big deal. But my dad made provisions so that we could be in the basement. We had a little stove down there, I think. And then my mom did a lot of canning, so we had lots of canned goods down there. We could have survived for a short period of time. Not, I don't think we would. Anybody would have, survived a nuclear explosion. But it made us feel good thinking that we were prepared for these different things. But the Cold War was the Cuban Missile Crisis.
Mm-hmm.
That was a pretty scary time. And of course, we really didn't know about it until it was all over. But still, it was scary.
So you obviously were alive though during Vietnam. What
Right.
was that like?
I lost a couple of friends and a couple of family members in Vietnam, knowing that anybody could end up over there at any time, and how really, really bad situation that was a cloud hanging over all of us.
Once you graduated from high school, what did you do?
I got married the month after I graduated,
Mhm.
and then I left safe little West Union, Iowa, and your Grandpa Lachlan was stationed in Norfolk, Virginia. And I'd never seen so many cars in my life or so many lanes in my life. And that's a major port in the world. And so there's not just Americans there, there were people from all over the world there. It was wonderful. It was scary, but wonderful.
And I know because obviously I've talked to my mom, you ended up also in North Carolina for a bit.
South Carolina. Yep, Charleston, South Carolina. It was a huge culture difference, but it was fun because we were together most of the time.
Yeah. When did you move back to Iowa?
We moved back in 78. We wanted to raise our kids in Iowa so they would be safer.
Yeah. So when did you decide to further your education? I know you mentioned you did a year of college.
After my husband graduated from college, it was supposed to be my turn. And I went to a year of college, and then there's some things that came up, and we decided that we would focus on the family. I had some health issues, and so I started selling Avon so that I was just not sitting around the house thinking about my health issues.
Did you enter any particular job or career before Avon, or were you more of a stay-at-home mom?
I was secretary a couple of places, and then when Grandpa started his CPA firm, I was secretary, receptionist, all around gopher.
What are some important takeaways that you would want people to remember from your experiences being at a consolidated school?
I think that for everybody, they should remember to not, don't be too quick to judge. Just because you think you know somebody that they look a little different and I could never be friends with them, don't do that, because may be missing a really big opportunity to know somebody really special.
And did you have any best or worst days of school?
When President Kennedy got shot, that was probably real close to the worst.
Did you have a best day of school?
I think one of the best days was when I graduated, because we were all so excited and the world lay out before us, and I was going to get married in just a couple of weeks, and it was just a glorious day.
What were some lessons that you learned from this time in your life?
Don't be afraid to try new things. I think that would be the biggest thing.
What comparisons or contrasts can you draw from your experiences in school when you went to school versus today's education system?
I worry about how our kids are being taught, because when we were taught math, we learned the multiplication tables, we learned the division, we learned the this and that, whatever. We didn't have computers, we didn't have calculators, we didn't have all this stuff. And when you have it in your memory, you don't lose it, and you know how to function. But when it's everything is with a computer, everything is with a calculator, everything is looking it up online instead of going to an encyclopedia to look it up, I think we lose a lot of our intelligence, our ability to think for ourselves, because it's laid out there for you by somebody else. If you're the one who's doing the research, then you're the one who's forming the opinion, and you're the one who's learning from it. And the other thing I would be very, very careful about is reading books that don't have footnotes, don't have acknowledgments, don't have any basis in the real facts.
And I guess just going off of that, would you consider those to be probably the biggest changes in education over the years, or would you say that?
I think that's one of the huge things is that. And we should be grateful for how far we've come and not live in the past of where we were because we're not there anymore. And we should be moving forward and building on what other people have done and other people have taught us.
And is there anything else that you would want to talk about that we just maybe didn't get to have the chance to talk about?
Now, as far as school's concerned, I think we covered that pretty well.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate this. So